As Emma points out, we're in a different bit of the workshop today. Very exciting. Anyway, yesterday we had a phone call from George, who's in Mongolia with his 140 on the Peking to Paris rally, and the person that prepped his car chose to use standard bushes, whereas of course all our cars get prepped with high quality polyurethane, and they failed. So we have been requested to send out 2 complete wishbones to him urgently to arrive in Russia. So this seems a good opportunity to fly through a video. Now I'm not going to spend too much time because I've got to get these out of the door fast. So, in prepping up our wishbone to send to George, the first thing we're going to put in is put the reinforcer on the bottom, which all 140s need. You cannot do without this. So, this gets welded onto the bottom of the wishbone. So first of all, you need to have this all cleaned up, because as usual in welding, the cleaner your metal, the easier and more beautiful the job is when you finish. So all that's nicely cleaned up, and I've got a nicely cleaned earth point here. So I'm going to go forth and use my favoured TIG set to weld that up, and I shall talk to you again in a minute. So, first of all, we lay the plate on. We get our 2 5/16 UNC bolts and secure the plate. Being TIG and ferrous, we're on DC. And away we go. Talk to you in a minute. The fumes you can see are actually from the underseal beneath. Right, so there's stage 1, all TIG welded up, and now I'm going to go away and use my die grinder to match the wishbone inner profile here to my plate outer. And the reason for this is that my plate outer is designed to be the right size for a Bilstein shock absorber to fit through, whereas ordinarily it's very difficult to get a bilstein to go through the original wishbone. So we just have to grind out the wishbone profile to match my plate profile. I'll be back in a moment. Okay, so this reinforcing plate is only appropriate really for competition cars. Road cars don't suffer from the same fatigue problem. And what happens on competition cars is because the shock absorbers are working so hard on rough surfaces, these two areas where the shock absorber bolts to the wishbone fatigue. It's the only failure of the entire car that we had on London to Cape Town. But I've also had that failure on the Preston as well, so I've actually known it twice. This solves it. And hence we had these plates made up to our own design, laser cut for us. They're always in stock, so if you are rallying a 140, you really do want to get hold of one of these from us. They will stop this routine failure. Okay, so I've now ground the inside edge of the wishbone to match my plate profile. So now we're going to just weld around that edge as well. So I'd say this is for competition cars. Road cars don't suffer this problem. Okay, so that's it. We've seam welded around the outer perimeter, and then we've seam welded around the inner. Unless you've got the suspension very wrong, this will not fail at the shock absorber mounts. So, we can pop out those two retaining bolts again. And we'll head over to the press, and we'll press out the lower ball joint and the two bushes. Okay, so lower ball joint first, we support it. Now this is a support I've made out of various old bearing outers. Supports that nice and level. So use something like a 19mm socket, long reach there, just to support the ball joint vertically. And there it goes. There we go, so that's the lower ball joint out. Give the bush outer seals just a little squirt of releasing fluid of some description. There and there. And once again, we support it with a purpose-built unit like that. Now, they both come in from the same side and both go out the same side. So, our first way through, we're going to press the shell here level with the wishbone using an old socket like that. So we're pressing squarely down on the wishbone here, just checking that that's nicely centered, which it is, and there we go, that's the seal. That's the shell level with the wishbone now. There, that's the shell outer, is level with the wishbone collar there. So now we choose a socket that will run through the wishbone to support the shell. Okay, just check that it hasn't slipped, and it hasn't. There it goes. There it is, almost out. There it goes. One bush removed. Now we support the wishbone again. And press the other bush till it's level with the wishbone collar. There we go. And our drift. And then just knock the bush out. Now we're ready to install the new bushes.
Yep.
Okay, so we'll put the first bush in, and we're going to start from the aft side of the wishbone. This is a right-hand wishbone, so there's the rear of the car pointing that way. And the reason the bushes go in this direction, both of the bushes go in from the rear, is of course that's where most of the force is. When the car is under braking, the whole weight of the car is thrusting that way against the wishbone. And that's why you put them both in from the rear. So we're going to put a smear of silicone grease around the inside of the collar just to help things along. A small bit of silicone grease on the leading edge of the bush. Now I'm using polyurethane here because this is a competition car and this is the best solution. Exactly the same principles apply for the standard bush, no difference. We then support it, support the wishbone on our collar, and we find an appropriate sized item to press perfectly on the shoulders of the steel sleeve, not on the bush. We must not press on the bush. So here we have, it's another old bearing item, and that you can see it's a slight interference fit on top of the bush material, but then it just presses down, and when we press in, we're pressing on the shoulder of the sleeve. We are not pressing on the bush material. That is critical. Okay, let's go. Everything's looking square, and then we go. There we go, that's the rear bush in of the right hand side. There we go. And next we're going to put the front bush in, which also comes in from the rear side going forwards. Okay, so now we do the forward one which is slightly more fiddly. So a quick smear of silicone grease. And on the leading edge of the bush shell, we place it in from the rear. We put on our collar, so we're pressing on the shoulder. Now this is the awkward bit. What you've got to do is arrange your press such that the bearing is nicely the bush is nicely supported, but there's room to press the wishbone down. So now we put on our collar. Wind down. Okay, this arrangement should ensure that everything goes in line. Away we go, watching this here, that this area here doesn't get fouled, because you'll bend the wishbone. I'm just getting a bit close there, so I'm going to re-sight. Like so. Okay, we've got about 3 mil to go, but I don't quite have that here, so we re-sight again. And we're there. I'll take off the collar like that, and we have the shoulder flush with the wishbone collar. We're good there. So now for the polyurethanes, we just run some silicone grease around the inside. There we go. In we press with that, and from the outside, we press that one on, and then just press it in by hand, leaving about 10 mil proud. Oops, that's probably a bit much, there's a bit proud there. It'll make life easier when you fit it to the car. There we go. The inner's slightly proud. That is now just waiting for its lower ball joint. So our last task is to pop in the lower ball joint. Now, being a competition car, I've just cleaned up 2 of the edges of the wishbone collar that I will later just do a little spot weld on both sides. Now, I honestly don't know whether this is necessary. But it certainly does no harm. On a road car, I wouldn't bother doing it. So, pop the lower ball joint in, support it nicely, and I'm going to put it through this hole here so it has ability to drop down. We support the edge of the ball joint. We don't press, do not press on the center of the ball joint, you will destroy it. So we press on the edge there. And there we go, that's pressed cleanly home. I'm just going to take it over to the MIG welder now and put a couple of spot welds on it. Come on over. Yep. Okay, right, so just 2 quick tack welds on the side of the ball joint. And the very last stage before this flies out to Mongolia is just to pop the lower bump stops back in. There we go. That is now ready to go to Russia for George, and we'll rescue him from the failure of fitting standard bushes where he should have fitted polyurethane on an event like the Peking to Paris. We're off. Thank you.